A king hunting a traitor, a witch scrubbing a floor, a lethal trap set to destroy them both. Dax stood in the dark hallway outside the abandoned warlock den, pure fury humming in his veins. The Alpha King of the City Pack tracked his enemy to this exact spot. He brought no backup. He needed none. He planned to kick the oak door off its hinges, grab the coward by the throat, and end the threat to his territory. He did not know a tripwire curse waited just past the threshold, hungry for blood. He also had no idea a broke supernatural cleaner named Harper was on the other side of that door, wearing a yellow plastic apron and trying to earn rent money. In 5 seconds, the king will kick the wood in. In 6 seconds, the hidden magic will trigger. And in 10 seconds, the most feared werewolf in the city will vanish in a flash of light, leaving a fluffy golden retriever in his place. Chapter 1. The supernatural cleanup business did not pay enough for this nonsense. I knelt on the sticky hardwood floor of the abandoned warlock den, scrubbing a glowing green stain with a wire brush. The room smelled like burnt copper and sour lemon. The warlock who rented this place skipped town, leaving behind a mess of cursed potions and ruined furniture. My yellow plastic apron protected my jeans, but nothing could protect my nose from the stench. My scrub brush scraped back and forth. I needed this paycheck to cover rent. Without warning, the sturdy oak door splintered inward. The wood shattered, sending chunks flying across the room. I dropped my brush and spun around, my hands snapping up to summon a kinetic block. A giant man stepped through the ruined doorway. He stood tall, with broad shoulders and a chest that stretched the fabric of his dark shirt. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, full of rage. This was Dax, the Alpha King of the City Pack. I recognized him from the local supernatural news. "Where is he?" Dax barked, his voice rumbling through the small space. "Who?" I asked, scrambling backward away from the glowing stain. Dax ignored me. He took a heavy step into the center of the room, hunting for a traitor. His boots crunched on the broken wood from the door. He stepped right onto a loose floorboard. A bright crimson rune flashed under his boot. The warlock left a tripwire spell. Red energy coiled up Dax's leg like a snake. I did not think. I just reacted. My hands glowed with blue light, and I threw a block spell right at the king to shield him from the trap. My blue magic slammed into the crimson curse just as the trap exploded. The two spells tangled together. A blinding flash of white light filled the room, followed by a shockwave that knocked me flat on my back. My head hit the floorboards. The world spun. Smoke poured through the air, choking me. I coughed, waving the gray clouds away from my face. The spot where the Alpha King stood was empty. His boots, his dark shirt, his giant frame, all gone. Instead, sitting right in the middle of the scorched floorboards, was a golden retriever. The dog blinked. It looked down at its golden paws, then up at me. It had the exact same piercing blue eyes as the king. "Oh no," I whispered. The dog let out a sharp, furious bark. I scrambled backward until my back hit the wall. I brought my hands up, ready to cast another spell to defend myself. The dog took a step forward. Its tail did not wag. It lowered its head, baring straight, sharp white teeth. I just turned the most dangerous werewolf in the city into a family pet. Chapter 2. The golden retriever lunged. I braced for teeth, but the dog just tackled me to the rug. His heavy paws pressed hard into my ribs. The air violently rushed out of my lungs, leaving me gasping. I raised my hands to blast him off, my fingers sparking with blue energy. "Stop right there, witch!" The voice echoed inside my skull. It was deep, harsh, and loud enough to give me an instant headache. I froze. The dog stood on my chest, staring down at me with those terrifying blue eyes. "Did you just talk in my head?" I thought, too shocked to speak out loud. "The magic tied us together," the voice growled in my mind. "I am still an alpha. Change me back, now!" "I can't!" I shouted aloud, pushing against his furry chest. He did not budge. "I just throw block spells. I don't know how to reverse a tangled curse." The dog snarled. Hot breath hit my face. "You turned me into a fluffy joke. My ears are floppy. Change me back before I bite your hand off." "You bite me, and you stay a dog forever," I shot back through the mind link. My heart hammered against my ribs like a runaway train, but I refused to show fear. I was a witch. I survived worse than an angry mutt. Dax shifted his weight. "My pack will tear this city apart looking for me." "Then let them find you like this," I said, catching my breath. "Let them see the big, scary king wagging his tail. I bet they'll love it." The dog's ears flattened against his head. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through his throat. He knew I had a point. A pack only respected strength. If they saw him like this, someone would challenge him for the throne and kill him. "Fine," Dax thought, the anger clear in his mental voice. "Get up. We need a plan. And stop looking at my tail." "I wasn't looking at your tail," I muttered, shoving him off my chest. I stood up and brushed the dust off my jeans. The Warlock den was ruined. The floor was scorched, and the front door still hung broken off its hinges. We had a giant problem, and I had no idea how to fix it. Chapter 3. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Someone was running toward the broken door. The smell of pine and earth hit my nose. A werewolf. "Hide me," Dax snapped in my mind. I grabbed Dax by his golden collar and shoved him behind my large yellow cleaning cart. "Stay down and keep your mouth shut," I hissed. A second later, Beta Samuel burst through the shattered doorway. He was tall, with messy brown hair and frantic green eyes. He wore a gray jacket and scanned the ruined room, his claws extending from his fingertips. Samuel was Dax's right-hand man. "Where is he?" Samuel demanded, looking at me. "Who?" I asked, playing dumb for the second time today. I picked up my scrub brush and held it like a weapon. "The king! Dax! I caught his scent leading into this dump, and then it just vanished." Samuel stepped further into the room. He stepped right over the broken wood from the door. My mind raced. Dax crouched out of sight behind the plastic cart. "Tell him I left," Dax ordered through the link. "Tell him I chased a shadow north. Rogues always cross the north border." I swallowed hard. "A huge guy kicked the door in," I told Samuel, making my voice shake. "He smelled the air, got super angry, and yelled something about a shadow. Then he sprinted out the back window. He headed north into the woods." Samuel frowned. He walked over to the back window and looked out into the dark trees. He gripped the windowsill. "Are you sure?" Samuel asked, his green eyes narrowing. "Yes," I lied. "He had a crazy temper. It terrified me." Samuel let out a frustrated sigh. "That sounds like him. He never waits for backup." He turned away from the window and looked at my cleaning supplies. "Get out of here. It isn't safe." "I'm going," I said, grabbing my bucket. Samuel jogged out of the room, heading straight for the north woods to chase a ghost. I let out a long breath. The tension left my shoulders like a boulder dropping off my back. I peeked behind the cleaning cart. The golden retriever sat there looking annoyed. "Let's go," Dax thought. "Take me to your safe house. We have work to do." Chapter 4. I lived in a faded red brick building on the bad side of town. The stairs creaked under my boots as I led the dog up to the third floor. I unlocked my door, deactivated the hidden security spells, and pushed the door open. Dax trotted inside. He sniffed the air, taking in the small space. My apartment was tiny. I had a faded green couch, peeling wallpaper, and a cheap floral rug covering the scratched floorboards. "This place is a dump," Dax noted in my head. "You are welcome to sleep in the alley," I replied, locking the deadbolt. I walked into the cramped kitchen and opened a cabinet. I pulled out a bag of store-brand dry kibble I kept for stray dogs. I poured a scoop into a plastic bowl and set it on the floor. "Dinner," I said. Dax walked over to the bowl. He sniffed the brown pellets. He looked up at me with pure disgust. "I am not eating rocks," the king declared. "I eat prime steak." "You eat what I give you," I fired back. "I'm broke. This kibble is all I have. Deal with it." Dax walked away from the bowl and jumped onto my green couch. He curled up on the cushions, making himself comfortable. I glared at him, but I was too tired to fight. I slumped into the armchair across from him. Dax stared at my front door. "Those wards on your lock," he said, his mental tone shifting from angry to curious. "Those are high-level protection spells. A simple cleaner does not know magic like that. You are hiding from someone." My stomach tightened. "Mind your business." "We are tied together now," Dax pushed. "I need to know who I am working with. Elder Torin set that trap in the den today. He wants me dead so he can take the throne. He will use my disappearance to name himself regent." I leaned forward. "So what is the plan?" "Tomorrow, you get a job at the Pack Estate," Dax told me, his blue eyes locking onto mine. "You will bring me inside. We are going to spy on Torin, find proof of his treason, and find a cure. And you are going to help me." I looked at the fluffy dog planning a political war from my cheap couch. "Fine, but you owe me big time when this is over." Chapter 5. Morning sunlight sliced through the cracked blinds of my apartment. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in the armchair. My neck ached from sleeping upright. Across the small living room, the golden retriever lay stretched out on my faded green couch. He took up 3 cushions. His golden fur caught the light, but those piercing blue eyes stayed wide open, staring at the ceiling. "Turn on your phone," Dax commanded in my head. His mental voice held zero patience. "Check the local pack broadcasts, now." I rubbed my stiff neck and pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen featured a web of cracks, but the video player still worked. I tapped the Supernatural News application. The live feed buffered for a second before snapping into focus. The screen showed the grand courtyard of the city pack estate. Hundreds of werewolves stood in tense silence. At the front, standing on a raised stone platform, was Elder Torin. He wore a sharp black suit, his gray hair slicked back tight against his skull. He held a microphone. "Our king vanished," Torin announced to the crowd. His voice echoed across the courtyard. "We searched the North Woods. We tracked his scent to the border. He left us. In these uncertain times, the pack requires stability. We need leadership." I frowned, leaning forward in my chair. "Watch this snake," Dax growled in my mind. The dog sat up on the couch, his ears pinned back. "He is making his move." On the screen, Torin raised a hand to silence the murmuring crowd. "Pack law dictates that in the absence of an alpha, an elder must step up. I will assume the role of temporary regent until we locate Dax, or until we name a new king." A commotion broke out near the edge of the platform. A tall werewolf with messy brown hair shoved his way past 2 guards. It was Beta Samuel. I remembered his face from the ruined warlock den yesterday. "He has been gone for 1 night," Samuel shouted, snatching the microphone from Torin's grip. The speakers shrieked with feedback. Samuel glared at the crowd. "Our king chases rogues all the time. He always comes back. Naming a regent right now is an insult to the crown." Torin kept his face calm, but a cold smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "Beta Samuel, you speak from emotion. I speak from the law. The king abandoned his post. We cannot leave the territory undefended." Samuel stepped closer to Torin, his chest pushed out, ready for a fight. "You just want the seat for yourself." "Guards," Torin said, his tone flat, "escort the beta to the barracks. He needs time to cool off." 4 massive guards surrounded Samuel. The beta looked ready to tear their throats out, but he forced his fists to uncurl. He knew he could not fight 4 men on public broadcast without starting a civil war. Samuel shoved past the guards and stormed off the platform. Torin took the microphone back. "I take the oath of regent tonight at sundown." I tapped the screen, cutting the feed. The apartment went silent. Dax jumped off the green couch. He paced back and forth across the floral rug, his claws clicking on the floorboards just past the fabric edge. He set the trap, Dax thought, his voice vibrating with rage. That warlock den. Torin hired the warlock. He knew I would hunt the rogue down. He wanted me out of the way so he could steal the throne. "And he used a tangled curse instead of an assassin," I added, setting my phone on a side table. "An assassin leaves a body. A body proves murder, but a curse that makes you vanish? That just makes you look like a runaway king. Dax stopped pacing. He turned his golden head toward me. We need to get inside that estate. Torin will rip this pack apart for a profit. I will go down there today, I told him, standing up. They always need extra hands for cleaning, especially for a big event like a Regent Oath ceremony. I can get us in. Good, Dax replied. Get the job, because tonight, we start a war. Chapter 6. 3 sharp knocks rattled my apartment door. I froze halfway to the kitchen. The sound echoed in the quiet room. Nobody ever visited me. I kept my head down, paid rent in cash, and stayed out of pack business. It is Samuel, Dax warned through the mind link. I smell pine and earth. He tracked your scent from the Warlock den. Panic flared in my chest. Hide, I whispered, pointing to the bedroom. No, Dax shot back. He trotted to the center of the floral rug and sat down. If he smells dog in here and does not see a dog, he will tear the place apart. Act normal. Remember the lie. I am just a stray. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I walked to the door and turned the deadbolt. I pulled the door open a few inches. Beta Samuel stood in the hallway. He wore the same gray jacket from yesterday, but it looked rumpled. Dark circles hung under his green eyes. He looked exhausted. Can I help you? I asked, keeping my voice level. I need to ask you a few more questions, Samuel said, pushing past me into the apartment. He did not wait for an invitation. He stood in the middle of my living room, scanning the space. I told you everything I saw, I said, closing the door. I crossed my arms to stop my hands from shaking. The big guy chased a shadow north. That is it. Samuel turned to face me. I sent trackers north. They found nothing. No footprints, no disturbed brush. A man that size running full speed leaves a trail. It makes no sense. Before I could answer, Dax let out a soft whine. Samuel snapped his attention down to the rug. He stared at the golden retriever. The dog wagged his tail and gave a happy pant. It was a terrifyingly convincing performance. Where did you get the dog? Samuel asked, his voice tight. I found him wandering the alley behind the Warlock den, I lied, keeping my tone casual. He looked hungry. I felt bad for him, so I brought him home. Samuel took a slow step toward Dax. The beta knelt on the rug, bringing himself eye level with the dog. Dax stopped wagging his tail. He sat perfectly still. He does not act like a stray, Samuel noted. He reached a hand out. Dax let Samuel scratch behind his golden ears. I held my breath, waiting for Dax to bite the man's fingers off. Instead, Dax leaned into the touch, playing the part of a dumb pet. But then Samuel tilted his head. He stared right into Dax's face. The beta's green eyes narrowed. His eyes, Samuel whispered. My stomach dropped. He sees it, Dax growled in my head. Get him out of here before he figures it out. He has beautiful blue eyes, right? I interrupted, stepping forward. Like a husky mix. Anyway, I need to get to work. I have an interview at the Pack Estate. Samuel stood up slowly. He did not break eye contact with the dog for a long moment. Finally, he turned back to me. The Pack Estate? They are hiring? Cleaning crew, I said. They need extra help for the ceremony tonight. Samuel nodded, but his posture stayed rigid. Be careful around Torin. The man has no patience for humans. He walked to the door, placing his hand on the knob. He cast one final glance back at the golden retriever sitting on the rug. Keep your pet close, Samuel warned. Strange things are happening in this city. He pulled the door open and left, the latch clicking shut behind him. I slumped against the wall, blowing out a long breath. That was too close. He suspects something, Dax thought, standing up and shaking his fur out. He knows those are my eyes. We are running out of time. We need to find proof of Torin's treason today. Chapter 7. The service entrance of the Pack Estate buzzed with chaos. Delivery drivers shouted, carrying crates of vegetables and prime meat through the double doors. I stood in the middle of the noise, wearing my yellow plastic apron over fresh jeans. I held the handle of a massive yellow mop bucket. The plastic bucket sat deep and wide, meant for industrial cleaning. I draped a thick gray towel over the top to hide the contents. Under the towel, Dax sat curled in a tight ball. "This is degrading," the king complained in my mind. "It smells like bleach and dirty water down here." "Stop whining," I replied, rolling the bucket forward. "You want it inside. This is the only way a cleaner brings a dog past security." I wheeled the bucket past a distracted guard. He did not even look at me. I pushed through the swinging doors and entered the main kitchens. The heat hit my face first. Huge stainless steel stoves roared with fire. Dozens of chefs rushed around, chopping herbs and searing steaks. "You!" a woman with a clipboard barked, pointing a wooden spoon at me. "New girl, take that bucket to the pantry hallway. Some idiot spilled cooking oil. Scrub it clean." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I steered the yellow bucket down a narrow, quiet corridor lined with shelves of canned goods. The noise from the kitchen faded slightly. I pulled the gray towel back. Dax popped his head out, taking a deep breath. "Stay low," I whispered, lifting a mop from the side rack and dunking it into the front section of the bucket where the water sat. "Listen for anything useful." I started mopping the stone floor, moving in slow, deliberate circles. 2 pack staff members, a man holding a clipboard and a woman carrying a stack of linens, walked down the adjacent aisle. They stopped near a rack of spices, their voices dropping to hushed tones. "Did you see the guest list for tonight?" the woman asked, checking over her shoulder. "I saw it," the man replied. "Torin invited the Blood Moon Alpha and the River Pack leaders. They arrive before sundown." I kept my head down, pushing the mop back and forth. "Rival packs," Dax noted in my mind. "He invited our enemies to the estate." "Why would he invite them?" the woman whispered, sounding terrified. "The River Pack hates us. They want our hunting grounds." "Torin is selling them the eastern border," the man said, his voice barely audible over the distant kitchen noise. I overheard him talking to his guards. "Once he takes the regent oath tonight, he is signing a treaty. He gives them the eastern woods, and they back his claim to the throne. If anyone challenges him, the rival packs will crush us." "Treason," Dax snarled. The bucket rattled as the dog shifted his weight. "He is selling my land. He is giving away our home to buy a crown." I gripped the mop handle tight. "We need physical proof," I muttered under my breath so the staff would not hear. "Gossip will not stop a coronation." The 2 staff members hurried away, carrying their supplies toward the main hall. I wrung the mop out and dropped the gray towel back over Dax's head. "Torin keeps a private ledger in his office," Dax told me. "He writes down every deal. If he is selling the border, the numbers are in that book. We need to get into his office." "We will," I promised, wheeling the bucket toward the exit. "But right now, we have a mess to clean up in the main hall." Chapter 8. The main hallway of the estate featured polished marble floors and towering glass windows. I kept the yellow mop bucket close to the stone pillar, the thick gray towel draped securely over the top. Dax stayed hidden inside. I sprayed glass cleaner onto the panes, wiping the glass in wide arcs. Footsteps clicked on the marble floor. I turned my head. Elder Torin walked down the hall, flanked by 4 armed guards. He wore ceremonial robes, a deep crimson fabric trimmed with dark fur. He looked like a king already. I turned my head. Elder Torin walked down the hall, flanked by 4 armed guards. He wore ceremonial robes, a deep crimson fabric trimmed with dark fur. He looked like a king already. "Keep your head down," Dax warned me from inside the bucket. I turned back to the window, scrubbing a spot of dirt with my rag. As Torin walked past us, the air shifted. A bizarre, pungent smell hit my nose. It smelled like burnt copper and sour lemon. Sulfur. My hands stopped moving. It was the exact same cursed scent from the ruined warlock den. Torin carried the stench of the tangled magic right on his robes. Dax smelled it too. The yellow bucket tipped over with a loud crash. Water spilled across the marble. Dax launched himself from under the gray towel, a missile of teeth and muscle. He scrambled across the slippery floor, charging straight at Torin. "Buster, no!" I screamed, dropping my rag. Dax launched himself off the floor, aiming his jaws right for Torin's throat. Torin gasped and stumbled backward. One of the guards stepped in the way, raising his arm. Dax's teeth sank into the guard's thick leather bracer. The guard yelled, trying to shake the dog loose. I sprinted across the hall and grabbed Dax by his golden collar. I braced my boots on the marble and hauled him back with all my strength. "Bad dog!" I shouted, putting on the performance of a lifetime. I dragged Dax away from the guard, forcing the dog to sit. I smacked his nose, hating myself for it. "What is wrong with you?" "Let me kill him." Dax roared in my head, fighting against my grip. "He smells like the curse. He did this to me. Stop fighting me or they will execute you right here." I shot back, keeping my grip iron tight on his collar. Torin straightened his crimson robes, his face pale with shock. He glared at me, his eyes burning with fury. "Whose animal is this?" "Mine, sir," I stammered, dropping to my knees and wrapping my arms around Dax to keep him pinned. "I am so sorry. He is a rescue. He gets startled by large groups." The guard checked his leather bracer. The thick material stopped the bite from breaking the skin, but deep teeth marks scored the surface. "Should I put the beast down, Elder?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I readied my magic, pulling blue energy into my fingertips hidden under Dax's fur. If the guard pulled a weapon, I would blast them all through the glass windows and run. Torin smoothed a wrinkle from his sleeve. He looked at the dog with pure disgust. "Do not dirty the floors with blood before my ceremony. Take your mutt and get out of my sight, girl. If I see that animal in the estate again, I will have it skinned." "Yes, Elder," I rushed out. "Thank you. It will not happen again." Torin scoffed and walked down the hall, his guards falling into step behind him. The scent of burnt copper faded as they turned the corner. I let go of Dax's collar, my hands shaking. Tonight, Dax thought, his blue eyes tracking the empty hallway. We break into his office tonight, and then we end him. Chapter 9. Shadows stretched long and thin across the restricted wing of the Pack estate. Midnight brought a brief, fragile window of silence to the compound. I pushed my yellow mop bucket down the dim corridor, the squeak of the plastic wheels echoing off the polished stone walls. My pulse drummed a frantic rhythm against my ribs. We had 5 minutes before the night guards looped back around to this sector. Dax trotted beside my boots, his golden paws making zero noise on the hard floor. He stayed low to the ground, his blue eyes scanning every dark corner for threats. "Torin's office sits at the end of this hall," Dax stated through our mental tie. His voice echoed crisp and clear in my skull. "The double oak doors. Move faster." "I am pushing a bucket of dirty water," I whispered, keeping my head down. "If I sprint, it spills. If it spills, we leave a trail." We reached the end of the corridor. 2 towering oak doors blocked our path. Brass handles gleamed under the flickering light of a single wall sconce. I reached out, hovering my fingers an inch from the wood. The air hummed with dormant energy. "Locked," I muttered, pulling my hand back. "And covered in hexes. If I hit that lock with my kinetic magic, alarms will scream through the entire estate." "Look down," the king directed. I crouched. A rusted metal air vent sat into the stone wall, mere inches above the floorboards. The metal grate looked ancient, fastened with 4 flathead screws. It fed directly into the wall holding Torin's private sanctuary. "You are too big," I told him, eyeing his fluffy golden frame. "I am a dog, not a bear," Dax shot back. "Take the cover off." I pulled the wire scrub brush from my apron pocket. I wedged the rigid wooden handle under the first screw and twisted hard. The old metal ground in protest, resisting my effort, but it eventually turned. I worked fast, my fingers cramping as I removed all 4 screws and set the heavy grate on the marble floor. Dust poured out of the dark hole, smelling of stagnant air and old cobwebs. Dax did not hesitate. He army crawled into the narrow shaft, his shoulders scraping the rusted sides. His back legs disappeared into the gloom. "It is tight," he grumbled in my mind. "I despise this. If my pack could see me right now, I would never hear the end of it. "Keep moving," I hissed. Footsteps clicked at the far end of the hallway. Panic seized my throat. A guard was coming. I stood up fast, kicking the metal grate behind my mop bucket to hide it. I grabbed the mop handle, dunked the sponge into the water, and started wiping the dry marble floor. A burly werewolf in a black security uniform turned the corner. He carried a heavy flashlight and stopped when he saw me. His nose twitched, taking in my scent. "What are you doing in the restricted wing?" the guard demanded. His voice carried a dangerous edge. "Spill detail," I lied, forcing a bored expression onto my face. I kept the mop moving in slow circles. "One of the kitchen boys dropped a tray of grease near the staircase. The supervisor told me to scrub this entire block until it shines." The guard frowned, stepping closer. He looked at the floor, then at my bucket. "Make it quick. Nobody belongs in this corridor after midnight." "Gladly," I said. "This place gives me the creeps anyway." The guard huffed a breath and continued his patrol, disappearing down an intersecting hallway. I let out a long breath, my knees shaking. A soft thud registered through the wall beside me. "I am in," Dax reported. "The room is dark. I am jumping onto his desk now." The sound of claws scrambling on polished wood confirmed his movement. "Got it," the king said, his mental tone shifting from annoyed to pure ice. A parchment map sits right in the center of his blotter. He marked the western and eastern pack tunnels with red ink. He wrote, "Attack points," next to the weak spots in our defenses. My breath hitched. He mapped out the invasion. "He is giving the river pack a direct path to the barracks," Dax snarled. I could feel his rage burning through our connection. "They will slaughter my warriors in their sleep. I need to get this map out to you." "Slide it under the door," I instructed. I dropped to my knees, pressing my face near the narrow floor gap. A moment later, the edge of a thick parchment poked through the space between the oak door and the floorboards. I pinched the corner and pulled. The map slid out into the hallway. I unrolled it under the dim sconce. Red circles glared back at me, marking out the betrayal in clear ink. This was the physical treason we needed. I folded the map tight and shoved it deep into my jeans pocket, right under my yellow apron. "Got it. Get out of there." Dax crawled back through the vent. He emerged covered in gray cobwebs, sneezing quietly. I shoved the grate back into place and finger-tightened the screws to hide our tampering. "We have the proof," Dax thought, shaking his coat out to dislodge the dust. "Now we need to build the cure." "One problem at a time," I muttered, grabbing the mop bucket handle. "Let's get out of this hallway before that guard comes back." Chapter 10. We rounded the corner, leaving Torrin's office behind. I pushed the mop bucket at a steady pace, trying to look like a bored employee finishing a long shift. Dax walked right beside my leg, his head swiveling to check our blind spots. The parchment map felt like a burning coal in my pocket. "Stop right there." The voice came from the shadows ahead. I froze, my hands tightening on the plastic bucket handle. Beta Samuel stepped out from behind a towering stone pillar. He wore the same rumpled gray jacket from my apartment. His gaze locked onto me, sharp and full of suspicion. He let his claws extend just a fraction from his fingertips, a silent threat that demanded compliance. "This wing is off limits to cleaning staff," Samuel said, closing the distance between us. His gaze flicked to my bucket, then down to Dax. "You are making a habit of turning up in places you do not belong." I forced a confused smile, acting clueless. "I got turned around. This estate is a maze. I was looking for the service elevator to take this dirty water back to the basement." Samuel did not smile back. He stepped right into my personal space. He looked down into the yellow bucket. "The water is mostly clean. Your mop is barely damp. You were not cleaning." My heart pounded a frantic beat. I readied my magic, pulling cobalt energy into my palms, hiding my glowing fingers under the folds of my apron. If he reached for me, I would blast him into the stone pillar and run for the exit. "Do not attack him," Dax ordered in my head. "He is my best friend. Let me handle this." Before Samuel could ask another question, Dax leaped forward. The golden retriever let out a high-pitched, pathetic whine. He threw himself at Samuel's boots, tangling himself in the beta's legs. Samuel stumbled back, surprised by the sudden assault. Dax dropped onto his back, exposing his fluffy belly, and began wagging his tail so hard his entire body shook. "This is the most humiliating moment of my life," Dax growled through the mind link, his mental voice dripping with pure venom. "I am the king. I command armies. Look at me." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "Buster, stop that!" I scolded out loud, though my voice lacked any real heat. Samuel looked down at the dog. The beta's tense posture broke. He let out a surprised breath that turned into a short, genuine laugh. He knelt on the marble floor and reached a hand out. Dax immediately licked his knuckles, panting like a giant, goofy puppy. "If you ever tell anyone I did this, I will banish you from the territory," Dax threatened in my mind. "Just keep licking, Your Majesty," I thought back. Samuel rubbed the dog's golden ears. For a second, the deep exhaustion on the beta's face lifted. The dark circles under his green eyes seemed less pronounced. He missed his alpha. He carried the weight of the entire pack on his shoulders, and this simple, mindless moment with a dog gave him a fraction of relief. "He likes you," I said softly, relaxing my magical hold. The blue energy faded from my fingertips. Samuel stood back up, his expression hardening again, though the lethal edge was gone. "The service elevator is 2 halls down on your left. Take your bucket and your pet and get back to the kitchens. If Torin catches you up here, he will not ask questions. He will just throw you in the dungeons." "Thank you," I said, grabbing the bucket handle. "I appreciate the warning." "I am not warning you to be nice," Samuel replied, his tone turning cold. "I am warning you because I do not have the time to clean up Torin's messes. Stay out of the restricted wing." Samuel turned and walked down the corridor, his boots clicking in a steady rhythm until he disappeared into the shadows. I let out a shaky breath and leaned against the cold stone wall. Dax rolled back onto his feet, shaking his fur out to reset his dignity. He glared down the empty hallway. "That was too close," Dax noted, the playful puppy act vanishing in an instant. "He is smart. He will connect the dots eventually. We need to move." "Agreed," I said, pushing the bucket toward the elevator. "We have the treason map. Now tell me how to build the cure so I can get my apartment back." Chapter 11. I dragged the mop bucket into a dusty, subterranean laundry room and locked the heavy metal door behind us. The room hummed with the sound of giant industrial washing machines. It smelled like bleach and hot cotton. It offered the perfect cover for a private conversation. I leaned against a washing machine, running through the spell formula in my head. To break a tangled spell of this level, we need a specific catalyst. The base of the cure requires silver root, which I already brewed at the apartment. But to ignite the transformation, we need a phoenix feather. Dax sat on a pile of folded white towels. A phoenix feather, rare magic. It burns white hot when exposed to kinetic energy. "Exactly," I said, tapping the page. "The feather absorbs my block spell energy and channels it into your cells, forcing your bones to shift back to their true form. Without it, you stay a golden retriever forever." "Torin keeps a phoenix feather in the pack's trophy room," Dax explained, his blue eyes narrowing. "It is a spoil of war from an old conflict, but there is a complication." "There is always a complication," I sighed, leaning against a washing machine. "Tell me." "The feather is locked inside a pure silver puzzle box," the king revealed. "Torin placed it there to keep thieves away. Werewolves cannot touch silver without protective gear. It sears our flesh. The guards protecting the room do not carry the key, and they cannot move the box." "But I am human," I realized, a spark of hope catching in my chest. "Silver does not burn me. I can touch the box." "Yes," Dax agreed. "You break the glass case, you grab the silver box, you use your magic to crack the puzzle lock, and we run." A sudden strange sensation bloomed in my chest. It started as a warm hum right behind my ribs and expanded outward. I gasped, dropping my grimoire onto the floor. I gripped my shirt, feeling a distinct secondary rhythm thudding right alongside my own heartbeat. "Do you feel that?" Dax asked, his mental voice dropping to a low, rough whisper. I looked up at him. The dog sat perfectly still, staring at me with an intensity that made the room feel small. The mind link hummed with a new kind of power. We were no longer just sharing thoughts. The connection was sinking deeper, fusing our instincts together. I could feel the adrenaline rushing through his veins. I could feel the heat of his anger, and beneath that, a fierce, undeniable protective urge directed right at me. "What is happening?" I asked, my voice barely a breath over the hum of the machines. "The mate bond," Dax answered. The truth hung heavy in the air between us. The magic tied us together to save my life, but the wolf inside me recognizes your spirit. You are my mate, Harper. I swallowed hard, stepping back until my shoulders hit the wall. I am a broke witch who scrubs cursed stains for a living. You are a king. This is just the tangled spell messing with your head. My wolf does not lie, Dax insisted. He jumped down from the towels and walked slowly toward me, stopping inches from my boots. We feel the same heartbeat. When we get my body back, I will prove it to you. The sincerity in his mental voice left me speechless. We stood there in the dusty laundry room, two souls connected by a freak magical accident, sharing a quiet moment of profound intimacy without even touching. The fear and tension of the night faded, leaving just the steady, synchronized thud of our hearts. "First, we survive the night," I managed to say, picking my book up from the floor. "Then we can talk about destiny. We have a trophy room to rob." Chapter 12. The corridor outside the trophy room felt like a fortress. Two massive guards stood at attention by the double glass doors, their arms crossed over thick chests. Inside the room, glass cases displayed ancient weapons, glowing gems, and war banners. Sitting right in the center, resting on a velvet pedestal, was the pure silver puzzle box containing the phoenix feather. I crouched behind a marble statue of a past alpha, peering around the base. Dax stood next to me, his muscles coiled tight under his golden fur. "I will draw them away," Dax projected into my mind. His tone held pure tactical focus. "When they chase me, you have exactly 40 seconds to breach the room, grab the box, and escape." "Be careful," I whispered. "If they catch you, they will lock you in the kennels." "They will not catch me," the king replied. Dax shot out from behind the statue, sprinting down the center of the hallway. He barked loud enough to rattle the windows. The guards jolted, their hands dropping to their weapon belts. Dax did not slow down. He leaped into the air, clamping his jaws around the bright red handle of a wall-mounted fire alarm. He used his full body weight to drag the lever down. A deafening siren shrieked through the estate. Strobe lights flashed blinding white pulses across the stone walls. Chaos erupted instantly. "Stupid stray!" one of the guards yelled. Dax dropped to the floor and bolted around the corner. Both guards cursed and sprinted after him, leaving the glass doors completely undefended. "Showtime," I muttered. I bolted out from hiding and pushed through the double doors. The siren noise doubled inside the room. I sprinted straight for the center pedestal. The silver puzzle box gleamed under the flashing lights. I did not bother trying to pick the glass display case lock. I pulled raw azure energy from my core, channeling it down my arms and into my palms. I slammed my glowing hands against the glass. A kinetic shockwave blasted the case apart. Glass shards rained across the velvet. I reached in and grabbed the silver box. The metal felt ice cold against my skin, but it did not burn. I shoved the box into my apron pocket and turned to run. I burst back into the hallway, sprinting toward the predetermined exit stairwell. Dax flew around the far corner, his paws scrambling for traction on the marble. He fell into step beside me, our synchronized heartbeats fueling our speed. We hit the double doors leading to the east stairwell and pushed through. We slammed right into Beta Samuel. I bounced off his solid chest and stumbled back. Samuel stood on the landing, breathing hard, looking between me and the golden retriever. The flashing strobe lights cast harsh shadows across his face. Samuel looked at the yellow apron. He looked at my flushed face. Then his green eyes dropped to my pocket, where the corner of the silver box poked out. He knew exactly what was inside that room. He knew exactly what I just stole. "Arrest me!" I challenged over the wailing siren, bringing my hands up. Blue kinetic sparks danced across my knuckles. I was ready to fight our way out. Samuel stared at me. He looked down at Dax. The dog stood tall, placing himself between me and the beta, baring his teeth in a silent snarl. The beta's expression shifted from anger to profound confusion. He looked at the dog's piercing blue eyes, then back to my glowing hands. He did not reach for his radio. He did not extend his claws. Samuel stepped aside, pressing his back against the wall to clear the path. "Run," Samuel ordered, his voice tight with conflicting loyalties. I did not waste a single second. I grabbed Dax by his collar and dragged him down the concrete stairs, plunging into the dark, leaving the confused beta standing in the chaos behind us. Chapter 13. We sprinted away from the estate and did not stop until we reached my street. The night air burned my lungs. I took the stairs of my building 2 at a time, my boots thudding against the worn wood. Dax bounded right beside me. We reached the 3rd floor and I shoved my key into the deadbolt. I pushed the door open, ushered the dog inside, and locked it behind us. I dragged my hand across my forehead, wiping away cold sweat. I pressed my fingers against the wood of the door, channeling a fresh pulse of azure magic into the security wards. The invisible barrier hummed, sealing us inside. "We made it," I breathed. "Empty your pockets," Dax ordered through our mental tie. He paced across the living room rug, his golden tail stiff. "We need that potion boiling right now. Torin will notice the broken display case. He will send hunters." I untied the yellow plastic apron and tossed it onto the armchair. I reached into my jeans and pulled out the rolled parchment map. I tossed it onto the small dining table. It hit the wood with a soft slap. Then, I reached into the apron pocket and pulled out the silver puzzle box. The metal felt like a block of ice in my bare hands. I carried it into the cramped kitchen and set it on the laminate counter. "Step back," I told the king. I summoned a tight, concentrated sphere of blue kinetic energy in my right palm. I did not need to solve the intricate sliding panels of the silver box. I just needed brute force. I slammed my glowing fist down onto the center of the lid. The silver crumpled inward with a loud crunch. The metal hinges snapped. I peeled the ruined lid back, ignoring the sharp edges. Resting on a bed of black velvet was a single, iridescent feather. It glowed with a faint, warm light. "The phoenix feather," I whispered. I grabbed a dented aluminum pot from the cabinet. I retrieved a glass jar of cloudy liquid from the fridge. I spent the last 3 days extracting the juice from raw silver root for this exact moment. I poured the base liquid into the pot and struck a match, lighting the gas stove. The flames licked the bottom of the aluminum. The liquid began to bubble within minutes. I held the glowing feather over the pot and dropped it in. The moment the feather touched the boiling liquid, the color shifted. The cloudy gray turned into a brilliant, shimmering cobalt blue. A thick cloud of steam rose toward the ceiling. The kitchen filled with a distinct, beautiful scent. It smelled like fresh rain hitting pine needles in the deep woods. I leaned against the counter, watching the blue liquid simmer. Dax jumped onto the couch in the other room. He rested his chin on his paws, watching me from the shadows. "You fight like a wolf," Dax projected into my mind. His tone lacked his usual arrogance. It sounded genuine, almost quiet. "You did not hesitate in that hallway. You broke the case, grabbed the prize, and ran. Most humans would freeze. You stayed ready for violence." "I grew up on the bad side of the magical tracks," I replied, keeping my voice low. "You learn to hit first or you end up in the dirt." "You protect my pack better than my own elders," Dax continued. "You risked your life tonight to steal that map and save my throne." A strange sensation bloomed right behind my ribs. It felt like a drumhead pulled tight, vibrating with a new, intense rhythm. It was not fear. It felt like a live wire buried under my skin, connecting my core directly to the animal sitting on the couch. "Do you feel that?" Dax asked, his mental voice dropping to a rough whisper. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. My knuckles turned white. A secondary pulse echoed inside my chest, beating in perfect time with my own heart. I could feel his emotions. I felt his lingering rage toward the traitor, but beneath that, a fierce, undeniable urge to protect me. "What is happening to us?" I asked, staring at the boiling blue liquid. "The mate bond," Dax answered. The truth hung heavy in the quiet apartment. "The spell tied our minds together to save my life, but the wolf inside me recognizes your spirit. You are my mate, Harper." I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. "I scrub cursed stains for a living. You run a kingdom. This is just the magic messing with your head." "My instincts do not lie," he insisted, jumping down from the cushions. He walked into the kitchen and sat at my feet. "When I get my human body back, I will prove it." We stayed in the kitchen, listening to the potion bubble. The fear of the night faded into the background, replaced by the steady, synchronized thud of our connected hearts. Chapter 14. The kitchen clock ticked past 2 in the morning. The cobalt liquid needed another hour to simmer and stabilize. If Dax drank it too early, the magic would shatter his bones instead of reshaping them. I sat at the small dining table, staring down at the parchment map. The red ink marking the eastern tunnels mocked us. Torin planned to let the river pack march right into the sleeping barracks. The betrayal was staggering. Dax paced near the front window. His claws clicked a restless rhythm against the floorboards. "Torin knows the silver box is gone by now," Dax thought. His mental voice held a sharp, tactical edge. "He knows Samuel caught you in the restricted wing. The Elder will connect the dots. He will not wait for the sun to come up." "The wards on my door are strong," I said, tracing the red ink with my finger. "Anyone tries to break in, the kinetic spell will throw them down the stairwell." "Wards stop blunt force," Dax replied, stopping his pace to stare at the front door. "They do not stop a coordinated breach. Torin has money. He can hire professionals who know how to dismantle magical locks." A cold chill crawled up my spine. I pushed my chair back and stood up. I walked into the bedroom and grabbed a heavy pair of steel-toed boots from the closet. I kicked my sneakers off and laced the boots up tight. If we had to run, I needed traction. Dax's ears twitched. They swiveled toward the front door. He froze. "2 men," Dax warned, his upper lip curling to reveal his teeth. "They are in the hallway. They smell like cheap cologne and dried blood. Rogues." My heart hammered a frantic war beat against my ribs. I rushed to the center of the living room. I pushed the heavy couch across the floor, dragging it until it blocked the direct path from the front door. It created a narrow choke point. "Can you fight?" I whispered, pulling raw blue energy into my palms. My hands glowed, casting harsh shadows against the peeling wallpaper. "I am a king," Dax growled in my head. "I will tear their throats out." "You weigh 80 pounds right now," I reminded him, my eyes locked on the door. "Do not let them pin you." "Aim for their knees," he instructed, crouching low behind the barrier of the couch. "Drop them to the floor. I will handle the rest." A soft scratching sound echoed from the hallway. Someone was working on the deadbolt. A faint sizzle of dark magic hissed through the crack under the door. The rogue hitmen brought a hexbreaker. My blue wards flared bright for a split second, illuminating the edges of the doorframe, before sputtering out completely. The invisible barrier was gone. "Get ready," I said, bringing my glowing fists up to my chest. "If we get separated, run for the estate," Dax ordered. "Do not look back for me." "We do not get separated," I shot back through the mind link. The brass doorknob turned slowly. The lock clicked. The wood did not just open, it exploded. A massive boot kicked the center panel right below the handle. The wood shattered inward, sending jagged splinters flying across the floral rug. The doorframe cracked, unable to hold the hinges. The ruined door slammed against the interior wall. 2 men stepped through the wreckage. They wore dark tactical gear and carried short, curved hunting blades. Their eyes glowed a dull, unnatural yellow. "Kill the witch!" the first rogue ordered, stepping into my home. "Grab the dog!" Chapter 15. The first rogue lunged over the shattered doorframe. He brought his curved blade up in a vicious arc, aiming straight for my chest. I did not retreat. I stepped into his attack, thrusting my glowing left hand forward. An azure, kinetic block formed in the air between us. The rogue's blade smashed against the magic shield with a loud crack. The impact sent a shockwave up my arm, jarring my shoulder, but the shield held firm. Before the rogue could swing again, a golden blur shot out from behind the couch. Dax launched himself through the air. He hit the rogue squarely in the chest, his 80 pounds of muscle hitting like a sack of bricks. The hitman stumbled backward, gasping for air. Dax did not let up. His jaws snapped shut around the man's wrist. The rogue screamed, dropping the hunting knife to the floorboards. The second hitman rushed through the door, trying to flank me. He vaulted over the couch, boots clearing the cushions with ease. I spun on my heel, pulling power from my core. I focused the energy into my right palm and unleashed a raw, kinetic shockwave. The blast of blue light caught the second rogue in midair. It slammed into his torso like a speeding truck. The force threw him backward. He crashed through the drywall of my narrow hallway, leaving a gaping hole in the plaster. Dust plumed into the air, choking my lungs. The man crumpled to the floor, out cold. "Behind you!" Dax roared in my mind. I whipped around. The first rogue managed to kick Dax off his arm. The king hit the side table, sending the parchment map fluttering to the ground. The rogue pulled a backup dagger from his boot and charged at me, his yellow eyes wild with rage. I swept my leg out, aiming my steel-toed boot right at his knee. The heavy metal connected with his joint. A sickening pop echoed in the room. The rogue collapsed, screaming in agony. Dax recovered instantly. He scrambled across the floor, leaping onto the downed man's back. He pinned the rogue to the rug, his jaws hovering inches from the hitman's throat. A deep, lethal snarl vibrated from the dog's chest. "Leave him!" I gasped, my chest heaving. "We need to go!" Dax backed away slowly, his eyes locked on the groaning men. The apartment was ruined. The front door hung in jagged pieces. Drywall dust coated everything. The protective wards were gone. Torin's men would send backup soon. I ran into the kitchen. The cobalt liquid bubbled fiercely on the stove. It reached the rolling boil phase. The cure was ready. I grabbed a thick glass flask from the drying rack. I used a kitchen towel to protect my hand from the heat and poured the glowing blue potion into the glass. I jammed a cork into the top, wrapped the thick towel securely around the scorching hot glass, and shoved the bundled flask into my wide apron pocket. I sprinted back to the living room and scooped the treason map off the floor. "Torin takes the oath in 20 minutes, Dax noted, trotting toward the shattered doorway. "If he finishes the ceremony, the rival pacts will flood the territory. The treaty goes into effect the moment he wears the crown." "Then we crash a party," I said. We stepped over the groaning hitmen and ran down the stairs. We burst out of the brick building and hit the dark streets, sprinting toward the pack estate. The flask burned hot against my thigh. We had one shot to reverse this tangled curse, stop a war, and save the city. Chapter 16. The iron gates of the pack estate loomed ahead. Torches lined the stone walls, casting long, flickering shadows across the pavement. The courtyard beyond the gates was packed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of werewolves. The tension in the air felt suffocating. I stopped 100 feet from the entrance, catching my breath. The heavy glass flask sat secure in my pocket. The map was tucked under my shirt. Dax stood beside me, his golden fur catching the torchlight. "Look at the platform," Dax commanded through our link. I peered through the thick iron bars. Elder Torin stood on the raised stone stage. He wore his deep crimson robes. A ceremonial silver crown rested on a velvet pillow next to him. Two rival leaders stood behind Torin. One wore the colors of the blood moon, the other represented the river pack. They waited for their land. On the lower step of the platform stood Samuel. The beta looked sick with dread. His shoulders slumped and his jaw locked tight. He watched the crowd with hollow eyes, knowing the pack was about to fall into the hands of a traitor. "Time to go," I muttered. I marched straight up the paved road toward the front gates. Two estate guards stepped out from the shadows. They held long wooden staffs capped with iron. They crossed the weapons, blocking my path. "Estate is closed to humans," the guard on the left grunted. "Turn around, cleaner." I stopped right in front of the crossed staffs. I did not back down. "I have an urgent delivery for Beta Samuel." "The Beta is occupied," the second guard said, looking down at Dax. "Take your mutt and leave before we toss you in the holding cells." Dax stepped forward. He did not bark. He did not growl. He just stared up at the guards with those striking, intelligent eyes. His posture radiated sheer dominance. Even in the body of a pet, his alpha aura pushed against the air. The guards shifted uneasily, glancing at the dog, confused by the sudden weight in the atmosphere. Torin's voice boomed over the courtyard loudspeakers. "We gather tonight in the shadow of a missing king," the elder announced to the silent crowd. "Our borders are vulnerable. We need a steady hand to guide us through the darkness." "He is starting the oath," Dax warned. "Get me past this gate, now!" I pulled my hands from my pockets. Blue kinetic sparks danced across my knuckles. The guards saw the magic and immediately leveled their iron-tipped staffs at my chest. "Last warning, witch," the first guard snarled. "I am not here to fight you," I said, keeping my voice steady over the booming loudspeakers. "But I am walking through those gates. If you try to stop me, I will launch you over the outer wall." The guards braced themselves, ready to strike. Through the iron bars, Samuel turned his head. He noticed the commotion at the entrance. He saw my yellow apron. He saw the golden retriever standing at my side. The Beta's eyes widened. He remembered the trophy room. He remembered the silver puzzle box. Samuel stepped off the platform, ignoring Torin's speech, and started pushing his way through the dense crowd toward the front gates. "He is coming," Dax told me. "Hold your ground." I kept my glowing fists raised, staring the guards down. Torin continued his speech, his voice dripping with fake sorrow. We stood inches from the enemy, seconds away from a violent clash. The heat from the wrapped potion flask radiated against my hip. The cure was ready. The king was ready to return. Chapter 17. The iron gates of the Pack estate felt like the edge of the world. Torches cast long, dancing shadows over the pavement. The estate guards kept their iron-tipped staffs crossed, blocking my path. Their eyes flicked to my glowing hands, calculating the risk of a fight. "Last warning, witch," the guard snarled, tightening his grip on the wood. Before I could unleash the azure magic building in my palms, a commotion rippled through the packed courtyard. Beta Samuel shoved his way through the dense crowd. He ignored the furious mutters of the pack members he pushed aside. He reached the heavy iron gates, breathless and frantic. He grabbed the guards' staffs and shoved them down toward the pavement. "Stand down!" Samuel ordered, his voice echoing with unquestionable authority. The guards hesitated, glancing toward the raised platform where Elder Torin continued his speech, but they ultimately stepped back. Samuel did not wait for questions. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice, and dragged me away from the gates. We pulled the golden retriever along, ducking into the deep, dark shadows behind the towering stone guardhouse. The roar of the courtyard faded slightly behind the thick masonry walls. "What are you doing here?" Samuel demanded. His green eyes darted between me and the dog. He looked exhausted, running on fumes and desperation. "I let you run with the silver box. I risked my rank. I risked a treason charge. Do not make me regret it." "I brought the king back," I said. I reached into my jeans pocket and pulled out the thick glass flask. The cork held tight. The cobalt liquid glowed in the dark alley, casting a strange blue hue over the rough stone. Samuel stared at the golden retriever. He looked at the dog's piercing blue eyes, the intelligent gaze that held far too much dominance for a simple pet. Realization washed over his face, draining the color from his cheeks. "You are insane." "Pour it," Dax commanded through our mind link. His mental voice held zero patience. "Before Torin finishes the oath." I pulled the cork free. The distinct, sharp scent of fresh rain and pine needles washed over the stagnant alley air, overpowering the smell of dirt and damp stone. I tilted the glass flask and poured the hot, shimmering liquid directly over the dog's golden fur. The magic ignited the second the potion touched his skin. A blinding flash of azure light illuminated the brick walls of the guardhouse. I threw my arm up to shield my eyes. The potion hissed, sinking deep into the canine anatomy. Then came the sound. Bones cracked and snapped with a sickening, visceral crunch that echoed off the alley walls. The dog twisted, his frame expanding outward with violent, unnatural force. The golden fur receded, melting away to reveal bare skin. Muscles bulged and stretched, tearing through the physical limits of the animal form. The transformation radiated raw, untamed power. The alpha aura hit the alleyway like a boulder dropping from the sky. The sheer pressure of his dominance forced Samuel to stumble backward, his boots scraping against the pavement. I planted my steel-toed boots wide, refusing to yield to the pressure. Agonizing seconds ticked by. The cracking stopped. The azure light faded into the night. A towering man stood in the shadows. He breathed heavy, his broad chest rising and falling in rapid, jagged breaths. His gaze burned with pure, unfiltered fury. He stood bare, unbothered by the cold night wind. The king returned, and he looked ready to butcher a traitor. Samuel stood frozen. His jaw hung slack. He blinked, trying to process the impossible sight standing right in front of him. Dax? Dax rolled his broad shoulders. His joints popped like cracking timber. He flexed his fingers, testing his human hands after days of running on pause. Give me your coat, Samuel. Samuel stripped off his rumpled gray jacket without a single word of protest and handed it over. Dax wrapped the sleeves around his waist, tying a tight knot to provide bare minimum coverage. I watched him, my heart thudding a relentless rhythm against my ribs. He looked dangerous. He looked like a warlord ready for a siege. Do you still hear me? Dax asked in my head. His mental voice felt deeper now, resonating right down into my bones. Loud and clear, I replied. The mate bond secured the connection, anchoring our minds together regardless of his physical form. Dax turned his intense focus to his beta. Torin set the trap in the warlock den. He used a tangled curse to erase me. He sold the eastern border woods to the river pack. We are taking my throne back right now. Samuel nodded, his posture straightening as his absolute loyalty flared to life. The elder moved the treaty signing into the Great Hall. The crowd outside waits for the final announcement, but the rival leaders sit at Torin's private table. Perfect, Dax growled, stepping out of the alley shadows. Let's crash the party. Chapter 18. We marched through the side corridors of the Pack estate, avoiding the main courtyard and the dense crowd. Dax led the way. His bare feet slapped against the polished marble floors in a steady, determined cadence. Samuel flanked his right side, his claws extending from his fingertips, ready for a bloodbath. I guarded the king's left flank, pulling azure kinetic energy into my palms until my hands cast a bright glow against the stone walls. We reached the entrance to the Great Hall. 2 towering oak doors stood closed, sealing the traitors inside. Dax did not pause. He did not ask for permission to enter his own fortress. He planted a bare foot on the marble, twisted his hips, and kicked the heavy oak doors right where the iron lock sat. The impact sounded like a cannon blast. The wood splintered. The iron hinges screamed under the sudden force. Both doors flew open, crashing against the interior stone walls with a deafening boom. We walked into the Great Hall. The opulence of the room stood in stark contrast to the violence we brought. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting warm light over rich tapestries and polished stone. At the far end of the hall, Elder Torin stood at a long mahogany table. The ceremonial silver crown rested on a velvet pillow near his right hand. The Blood Moon Alpha and the River Pack leader sat across from him, looking smug. A rolled parchment treaty sat in the center of the table, waiting for ink. The room went dead silent. Hundreds of elite pack members, wealthy donors, and armed guards lined the walls. They all turned to look at the entrance. Torin froze. He held a feathered quill over an inkwell. His hand shook, brushing against a heavy, rigid bulge hidden beneath the fabric of his robes. A drop of black ink fell, splattering across the polished mahogany. He stared at the towering, half-naked man wearing a tied gray jacket. "It is an imposter!" Torin shrieked, his calm, aristocratic facade shattering into a million pieces. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. "A trick of dark magic, a warlock illusion. Guards, kill him!" The guards lining the walls hesitated. They gripped their weapons, but nobody moved a single inch forward. Dax unleashed his full alpha aura. The dominance filled the room, pressing down on the chest of every werewolf present. It commanded absolute respect and obedience. It proved his identity beyond any doubt. I stepped out from behind Dax. I reached under my shirt and pulled the folded parchment map from my waistband. I threw the map onto the center of the room. It unrolled across the polished stone floor. The bright red ink glared under the chandelier light, marking the secret tunnels. "That is Torin's private ledger," I announced, my voice carrying clear and sharp across the silent hall. "I stole it from his office. He marked the eastern tunnels for an ambush. He sold your borders to the river pack to buy his crown." Furious murmurs erupted from the elite pack members. The whispers grew into a low, dangerous rumble. Samuel stepped forward, his green eyes locked on the traitor. "I verify the map. I recognize the elder's handwriting. Torin is a traitor to the crown." Torin's face twisted with cornered rage. The air around him shifted. From 50 feet away, the pungent stench of burnt copper and sour lemon hit my nose. He reeked of the sulfur curse. He carried the guilt on his very skin. Dax took slow, deliberate steps toward the mahogany table. The crowd parted for him, opening a clear path to the stage. He did not yell. He did not scream. His voice remained a low, lethal rumble. "I challenge you, Torin," Dax stated, the ancient words of pack law hanging heavy in the air. "Right here, right now, for the throne and for your life." Torin swallowed hard. Pack law remained absolute. He could not refuse a direct challenge without forfeiting his rank, his honor, and his life anyway. He trapped himself. The rival leaders pushed their chairs back and stood up, realizing they backed a losing horse. The Great Hall became a battleground. Chapter 19. Torin knew he could never beat a Prime Alpha King in a fair fight. Desperation clawed at his features. Before anyone could blink, Torin reached deep into the folds of his crimson ceremonial robes. He pulled a jagged iron hunting blade from a hidden sheath. A slick, poisonous green liquid coated the steel edge. He lunged across the mahogany table, aiming the poisoned weapon right for Dax's unprotected chest, aiming to end the challenge with a single, cowardly strike. I reacted on pure survival instinct. I channeled raw power from my core, pushing the energy down my arms. A blast of azure kinetic force shot across the room. The shockwave slammed directly into Torin's wrist. Bones crunched under the impact. The poisoned blade flew from his grip, clattering uselessly across the marble floor. Torin screamed, grabbing his ruined wrist. "Cheat!" Dax snarled, his voice vibrating with disdain. Torin's eyes turned a sickly, glowing yellow. He abandoned his human form. His fine suit and crimson robes tore apart as his body expanded. He transformed into a mangy gray wolf with patches of missing fur. The beast snapped its jaws, saliva dripping onto the polished wood. Dax did not hesitate. He shifted. The gray jacket fell to the floor. In a single heartbeat, a towering black wolf stood in the center of the great hall. He dwarfed the gray wolf. His muscles rippled under a coat of midnight fur. His piercing blue eyes locked onto the traitor, burning with the promise of pain. I shifted my combat stance to provide immediate backup. I dropped into a wide, aggressive crouch, igniting both hands with swirling azure magic. I stepped out to cover the king's blind flank. Two of Torin's corrupt guards drew short swords, trying to rush the center of the room to save their master. I blasted them both with a sweeping kinetic shockwave, throwing them hard into the stone wall. They slumped to the floor unconscious. Nobody touches the king, I shouted, holding my glowing fists high. The wolf fight began. The black wolf charged. The clash sounded like two freight trains colliding. Teeth met flesh, claws scraped across the polished marble, carving deep, jagged gouges into the ancient stone. The gray wolf fought dirty, snapping at Dax's back legs and trying to blind him with frantic scratches. Dax remained a relentless force of nature. He absorbed a vicious bite to his shoulder, ignoring the blood matting his dark fur. He shook the gray wolf off with a brutal twist of his neck, driving his heavy skull into the traitor's ribs. Dax tackled Torin into the mahogany table. The heavy furniture collapsed under their combined weight. Thick wood splintered and shattered, sending the silver crown and the velvet pillow tumbling across the floor. The black wolf pinned the gray wolf to the ruined wood. Dax's massive jaws clamped tight around Torin's throat. He did not bite down to kill, but his teeth pressed hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. He held the traitor down, proving absolute dominance. The gray wolf stopped struggling. He let out a high, pathetic whine, baring his neck in complete submission. The challenge ended. The king reigned victorious. I held my glowing hands ready, scanning the room for any other threats, but the hall stayed still. The elite pack members watched in stunned silence. The rival leaders looked terrified. Dax stood over the broken traitor, his chest heaving, his blue eyes scanning his reclaimed territory. The war was over. Chapter 20. The Great Hall remained perfectly silent, save for the heavy breathing of the victorious black wolf. Dax released Torin's throat and stepped back. The gray wolf shrank, shifting back into the broken, naked form of the elder. Torin laid in the wreckage of the mahogany table, cradling his ruined wrist and gasping for air. Beta Samuel stepped forward, flanked by two loyal estate guards. They hauled Torin up from the floor without an ounce of gentleness. "Throw him in the deepest dungeon," Samuel ordered, his green eyes hard and unforgiving. "Lock him in silver chains. He faces the tribunal tomorrow." The guards pulled thick leather handling gloves from their belts before dragging the weeping traitor out of the hall. Dax shook his dark coat and shifted back into his human form. He stood tall amidst the splintered wood. Samuel stepped forward, scooping his discarded gray jacket off the marble floor, and tossed the garment across the room. Dax caught it and tied the sleeves around his waist again, covering himself while ignoring the fresh bite marks on his shoulder. The Blood Moon Alpha and the Riverpack leader stood near the shattered table, looking desperate for an exit. Dax turned his piercing blue eyes on them. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "The treaty is void. Take your people and leave my territory immediately. If I catch your scent across the eastern border by sunrise, we go to war." The rival leaders did not argue. They bowed their heads and hurried out the double doors, fleeing the estate before the king changed his mind. The rest of the pack dropped to their knees. Hundreds of werewolves, elite donors, and guards bowed their heads to the stone floor, offering their absolute loyalty to their true alpha. Dax ignored the kneeling crowd. He walked straight toward me. I lowered my hands. The azure magic faded from my skin, leaving my fingertips cold. I looked down at my scuffed steel-toed boots and my dust-covered jeans. I survived a supernatural hit squad, robbed a vault, and crashed a royal ceremony. My adrenaline began to crash, leaving my legs feeling like lead. Dax reached out and pulled me flush against his chest. His arms wrapped tight around my waist, grounding me. "You fight like a queen," Dax projected into my mind. His inner wolf purred with deep, possessive satisfaction. "I told you we do not get separated," I thought back, a small smile breaking across my tired face. Dax turned to face his kneeling pack, keeping one arm firmly wrapped around me. He pointed to the ceremonial silver crown resting on the floor, ignored and abandoned. "Torin tried to steal my throne," Dax announced, his voice echoing off the high vaulted ceiling. "He used dark magic to erase me. This woman brought me back. She broke into a cursed vault, fought off rogue hitmen, and stopped an invasion. She is not a cleaner. She is my mate." A collective gasp rippled through the kneeling werewolves, but nobody dared to raise a single objection. Samuel stood near the broken table and grinned, shaking his head in quiet amusement. Dax looked down at me, his gaze softening as he focused entirely on my face. I am never letting you go. We run this territory together. Just buy me better kibble next time, I replied out loud, leaning into his touch. Dax smirked, a genuine flash of humor lighting up his face. He pulled me in and kissed me, sealing the mate bond in front of the entire pack. We started the week scrubbing cursed floors, but we ended it ruling a kingdom. No loose ends, just a new era. The end.